Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope well. Welcome to International School of the East. Mhm. So we are in week four. Week four. Okay. This week we're going to go over the stew of meaning, right? The stew. So you need to know the date. This will be for October. Excuse me, November. See, I'm still stuck before Halloween, which, by the way, happy Halloween to everybody. Just get a lot of candy and then send it to my email. Okay. This will be for November the 5th. Okay. It'll be for November the 5th. And I think if I look at my schedule, no, I can tell you something else. Yes. As I look at this, okay, it says midterms are from the 20. Oh, I'm sorry. We're the Monday class. Okay, so this is for actually, yeah, sorry. November 2nd. Okay, November 2nd. So yeah, I had to correct that for you. So don't worry. So again, week four. Okay. So we ready for the stew of meaning? I hope so. We can get into it slowly but steadily. All right. So you go to the material. Okay. Let me minimize myself. Get me out of there. Oh, take me away. Okay. And then start the slideshow. Go to the beginning. Here we go. ENG, cross-cultural communication. And this is week 4. There it is, week 4. All right, so we're going to start at the top. And for Wani and Alishwan, just to let you know, because you ladies usually buy the book and follow me page per page, this will be page 19. So this chapter 5, the stew of meaning. I'm sorry, that was last week. This is 37. Sorry. Page 37. We're at the top of 37. Okay. All right. So here we go. The stew of meaning. So again, a stew is, well, it's not a hot pot. My Korean students, it would be like a daktoritang. We have a beef stew here, which is kind of like it's thicker than a soup. That's how we tell the difference. If it's a soup, you need a spoon. If it's a stew, you can eat it with a fork. So you can even buy cans of Dinty Moore beef stew with big chunks of beef and potatoes and carrots. Like I said, similar to a daktoritang, and obviously you can eat with a fork. You do not need a spoon. So we're talking about the stew and the different mixes and trying to understand meaning of language. And we'll get to see the two right away, the two components of that. Okay, they're very important. Again, this is cross-cultural communication. Okay? Many people, or many smart people, which are you, all my students, have tried to explain how we get meaning out of the symbols and sounds we use to communicate. In the previous chapter, we examined some of the questions whose answers either aid or hurt our understanding about what is being communicated. My theory is that meaning is like a stew. The communicator, here we go. Here's the part. The communicator puts in his ingredients, and the receptor, the person who gets the information, puts in his ingredients. Remember, a stew is a mix of potatoes and meat, so coming from different folks on the language side. The problem is that the ingredients, the answers to the questions we asked in chapter 4, which we didn't read, so not important, are not always the same. That just means any conversation. This means, notes Craft, that when you get right down to the fine details, no two people ever attach or give the same meaning to any given symbol, no matter how tight the group they are in. No two pots of stew are going to be exactly the same. So again, we're using the cooking analogy, the stew analogy. If I make a stew and Pamela makes a stew, maybe Pamela uses more salt than I do. Maybe I use more pepper than she does, right? Or maybe she adds a little adobo. So no two pots of stew are going to be exactly the same or taste the same. You might be thinking, can't we just go to the dictionary to find the meaning? Okay, you have to understand, this is a legitimate question. According to the compilers, or the people who put together Webster's dictionary, the dictionary is primarily a record of how the words of language are used. Remember, how they are used, not exactly the meaning, by those who speak and write it as a mother tongue, meaning your first language. The compilers of a dictionary do not make up words and give them meanings. See, there's a difference. They listen to people speak, read what is written, then place the meanings used in those contexts in the dictionary. The compilers of Webster's Continuum dictionaries do not tell their users how they ought to speak and write the language. Okay, so again, that's why you'll get on the East Coast, HERB is herb, and on the West Coast here, HERB is pronounced the herb with the H silent. Dictionaries don't tell you how to speak and write the language, but only how they can do so and what other speakers and writers think about the options available to everyone. Okay. Yeah. Language is constantly evolving. So evolving is like a mixture of growing and changing. See, they added it there. See, so language is constantly evolving, so growing and changing, to the point that dictionary can only give meanings that people can use, right? It's not the overall authority. Not only are new words created, but old words receive new meanings, right? So that's why when I was a kid, bad just meant bad. But later, when I was in high school, college, the kids changed it to a slang word. And when they said, hey, that's bad, it meant it was cool, right? So they can only receive the new meanings. So here we are at the word. So that means we're at the bottom of 37 already, right? Already at the bottom of 37, so that means I got to do questions. Okay. So let me put this aside. Okay. Wow, that was quick. I thought I was going slow. Okay, get the new share. Whiteboard. Oh, hello, whiteboard. Okay. Get that pencil. Ready for question 1. Again, straightforward questions. You got to know your material. Straightforward and right from the top. What is the author's theory why meaning is like a stew? So just keep it basic. Why is it meaning like a stew? Put down what he said. Okay. 2. Okay, 2. Dictionaries don't tell people what. Okay, I don't want any of my funny guys in here, like Purivi or Temujin, and they say, they don't tell people to shut up. That's not what I'm asking. There's something we just spoke about. Let me see if I can stretch this. That just, they don't do. Okay. So I'll give you a few minutes on this. One is kind of a long answer. Second one is shorter, but not too short. So I'll give you some time on those. Let me make my marking. Covered 37. I hope everybody's doing well. I hope everybody goes out to Halloween and gets a lot of candies, but don't forget to brush your teeth. We don't want cavities, you know. And if you want to, my email, you can send me some candy, right? Right. Everyone's doing okay. Yeah. And don't be so slow. Get off that Candy Crush. Be faster, like Tall. Tall is really fast. All right, you guys wrapping that up, I hope. Like I said, I know they're a little long. Okay, I guess I'll go for the eraser. I'm only giving you 2. The page wasn't as long as the other ones, so there we go. So again, repeating on, well, let me get the eraser first. Okay. What is the author's theory why meaning is like a stew? Again, don't say something silly like, well, he's a chef, he went to cooking school, that's why. No. Okay, 1 is gone. 2, Dictionaries don't tell people, again, the answer is not to shut up. It's not it. Okay. Alrighty. Let's go back to the material. Let me measure it up with the book. Okay. So we have finished 37. And if I move the page, it says gay used to mean happy. See, there's another change. We're at the top of 38, if you're following along. So gay used to mean happy, bright, and buoyant. And I will tell you, when I was a kid in elementary school, we would read literature to the teacher, and they would have passages like that. Oh, I went to the park and saw my friends, and I felt very gay, and it had nothing to do with the current term gay, which the technical medical term is homosexual. It just meant I was happy. You know, teacher might say, "Do you feel gay?" And yes, I feel happy. Okay. But now you see, as I continue, now it is a synonym for homosexuals. I guess in the maybe late 80s, maybe early 90s, gay people as a whole said they don't like the word homosexual. So they preferred to use gay. So they took it to mean that, and now nobody knows anymore, you know, that it's used to mean happy, bright, and buoyant. See? The old meaning is no longer the most prevalent or the most understood. The gay one for homosexual men is the one that's more understood when somebody says gay. You'd have to get an old person like a grandfather that they would remember that. I remember it, but I think my generation might have been the last. As noted in Webster's, no dictionary can include all meanings of its words because those meanings are ever expanding. Okay, what they mean there is, and what they're not saying is that two things usually change language. One is technology, right? You get new technologies and they have new words, you know, they're going to change the meaning of things, right? That's why we get things like for computer parts, and they're connected inside, they say they're hardwired, right? They connect the metal pieces and what have you, motherboard. So, but now we use it as a slang term that if somebody has a certain way that they are due to culture or the way that they're raised, we can say that they are hardwired that way, right? It has nothing to do with the computer board or the wires connecting with the metal. And so like a Korean person can tell you, like, let's say they try some Mexican salsa, and they say, "Oh, it's so good." And American guy says, "Really? How come you like that? You know, it's so spicy." And the Korean person can say, "Well, I'm Korean and I grew up eating kimchi, so I am hardwired to like spicy food." Okay. And again, so the other term which they don't mention is that young people change language. They change words. Right? So if we all know the word to throw up, right? When I was a kid, the slang term was barf. Okay? Then when I was in middle school, it became up chuck. And then in high school, throw up became hurl. I'm going to hurl. And then after that, I stopped paying attention because I got older. And then I'll never forget, I had my my nephew one time, my little nephew, and I was watching him and his friends were in another room. So I was watching TV. And he came up to me and he said, "Uncle, my friend Mike just Ralphed in the bedroom." And I said, "Ralph, you mean the supermarket?" "No, you know the sound it makes? Ralph." So there you go. Technology and young people change language. That's why they say here meanings and things are ever expanding. So, yeah. All right. Um, it is the context of the word that gives us the meaning of the word at any particular time. Okay. Each person brings his own perspective or way of thinking to what is being communicated. Whether he is the communicator or the receptor, so the person who gives the first ingredients, or the person that receives and adds their own, he will look at the communication from his point of view and evaluate it according to his language, history, values, and culture. Each person assumes that the other party understands how he is evaluating the communication. Failure to see the other person's perspective is why we sometimes have a hard time understanding each other, right? So, what I can say about that from a personal point of view is when I first, my feeling on language learning too, um, I discovered that if I try to get the feeling of how the people say it, um, it can really help me to understand the meaning, because a lot of American people, they'll just try to mimic, and sometimes they don't even make a big effort to copy the accent, right? That's why you hear some Mexican person says, "Muchas gracias." And then the American person says, "Yeah, much grass." So there's no effort at all trying to get the pronunciation. So I try to take it a little step more. So I'll give you an example. When I first began teaching in Koreatown, I had a number of students, and they would sit in a seat and look wiped out, and they would say, "Oh, chuketa." I would say, what does that mean? You know, I knew Himdara was tired, so I'm like, okay, maybe this is exhausted. But they told me it's more, it's deeper. And I had a hard time understanding it. Someone said kind of like it, you feel like you're almost gonna die. I'm like, wow, that's a strange feeling. I think we have that kind of word uh, in English. And then one day, I actually had the same feeling that I saw in my students. So when I said chuketa, I understood it. Like, oh my God, that feeling, it's worse than exhausted, right? And you all know the difference between tired and exhausted. Tired, you can still do something. Exhausted, if you sit in a chair, you might fall asleep in a few minutes, right? So yeah, try to get the feelings too. So again, this is why failure to see the other person's perspective is why we sometimes have a hard time understanding each other. Okay, now we're at the bottom here. Well, actually, though, um, yeah, we're not there yet. Okay, so while it may hamper understanding at times, so we're in the middle of 38. Seeing things from different perspectives is good. Very rarely is there only one way to look at something. And that's what I tell my students a lot. For me, language is also learning a culture, and it's looking at a different way to look at things, a different way to solve problems, right? So this book is kind of agreeing with me. Very rarely is there only one way to look at something. When you look at a section of the Bible from your own perspective, it makes that section meaningful to you. The ability to see the same text from another perspective broadens or widens your view of another person or culture, the Bible, and the God who wrote it. Okay? Very important stuff there. Even when we have a hard time seeing the other person's perspective, it does not make it impossible to understand what is being communicated. And we'll have an example here. As Smith says, nevertheless, we can develop meanings that are approximately, and approximately means pretty darn close, the same between two individuals. To do so requires careful learning of, number one, the original context, two, the receiver's context, and it also requires, three, concentration on transferring sufficient information. So what that means is you have to give enough information. If you cut it short, then of course it's going to be incomplete, and it might be, definitely it's going to be hard to completely translate because there's information missing, But I'll tell you something here. It just made me remember something I just learned the other day. Okay, just to illuminate these points, okay, we can develop meanings that are approximately the same, very, very close. So to do so requires careful learning of the original context and the receiver's context. Okay, so I just saw something very, very interesting. So you know how they have these, these archaeologists go to Egypt and they're always discovering new Egyptian mummies, different kings, right? Okay, so they're usually buried with all kinds of personal belongings and artifacts, right? So they recently found a new mummy. I forget the mummy's name. And so they found a dagger, right? Which is very common. A dagger is a large knife, right? A dagger is a large knife. And okay, so here we go. I'm going to show you this, right? Here's learning careful of the original context. The description that they were able to translate from the hieroglyphics, which is the Egyptian writing that you see on the walls, they said that the dagger was made from sky metal, metal from the sky. And that's the original context. But the receiver's context, the modern archaeologist didn't understand that. It doesn't make any sense. Metal from the sky? Metal doesn't come from the sky, right? So you have to translate or transfer sufficient information. So that's all they had. And the original context was different than our context. So I think eventually by accident, they actually found out what they meant by that, right? And what they meant is this dagger for this Egyptian king, the metal used was from a meteor. Those big, giant, hot stones that come from space and land and make big holes, that is what they meant by sky metal. They didn't have a word that said meteor, right? So again, if these things are off, you're not going to have a complete understanding. Okay. Continuing, we may not be able to get a one-to-one agreement, but the more we understand about the communicator and the receptor, the closer to the meaning we will get. Sometimes that's all you can do, right? Is get as close as you can. You know, that's just the way it is sometimes. So think about when you first meet someone. You may not understand his jokes or the way he says some things, but you can still communicate. The more you get to know that person and learn the answers to some of the questions, the more you're able to understand him and why he says things the way he does. Another person who has just met your friend might think he is weird or strange, but you know him well enough to know that he is not. He has his reasons for expressing himself the way he does. You understand your friend's stew, right, of meaning. People living in different cultures, however, okay. So this, however, down here brings us to the bottom of 38. Okay. Brings us to the bottom of 38, so you know it's time for the whiteboard and more questions. Okay. Go to the new share. Get that pencil. Okay. Okay. Do you know? Actually, I had a number 3 question for the first page, so I'll just add it on here. Okay. It's a short one, so. You'll enjoy it. No problem. Just take a step back. We spoke about this one. Okay, easy as pie. Language is constantly doing what? Again, for the V, I don't want you or Mr. Hong saying things like, language is constantly dancing. No, it's not the answer. So let me stretch this out. I think those ghosts are coming back. Ah, it took too long. Oh, there we go. Ooh. Okay, I stretched it out. Okay, now for the questions appropriate to this page. This is a good one personally for everybody here. Hope you like this question. Or the likable question. What does each person, oops, I missed a word in there. Let me fix this. Good thing I can do that. I won't charge you on this one. Okay, 4. What does each person bring to communication? What do they bring? Don't say, oh, they bring their wallet and money. That's We're talking about communication here. Follow the paths. So I stretch that out. And one more for our second page here. So this is a little longer question for me, but your answer is not that long. Whoops, maybe if I would smell correctly. There you go. Whoops. This machine's jumping ahead. Okie dokie. 5. The more we understand the communicator and receptor, what will happen? What will happen to communication? Oh dear. So let me give you some minutes for these 3 long ones, okay? We'll stretch. Let me see how much I can stretch. That looks pretty good. Okay, so go ahead, take your time. I'm gonna make my markings. Caroline, don't forget to bring me a lot of candy from your Halloween trick-or-treating, okay? Candy corn is pretty good. Wonder if you have candy corn in Indonesia. Okay. So you guys wrapping that up on these 3. At least write your questions. You can look at the video again later, or just read the material. You can get your answers again. All right. Guess I will go for the erasure. Should I go out on Halloween and trick or treat? I might be just a little too old. Maybe last year I could have done it, but this year now I might be a little too old. All right, eraser time. All right. 3. Language is constantly doing what? Who knows? Just read the material. 4. What does each person bring to communication? Food and money and no. Come on, guys, you're not falling for my disinformation or my fake news. 5. The more we understand the communicator and a receptor, what will happen? Yes, sir. Okay. Those things are done. Go to the new share. Back to the material. Get the book. Okay, so it said people living in different cultures. However, that means we have finished 38. That was the bottom of 38. So we have to proceed on to the top of 39. Where is that arrow? Oh dear. Okay, so have, few, or similar is the top of 39. Okay. Okay, so have, few, or similar or shared experiences that do those living in the same culture. Yes, so you can live in the same culture and have similar, fewer, shared, or different experiences. Therefore, the development of similar meaning becomes more difficult. When we look at the Bible, we are confronted by our culture and the Bible's culture, which are different, right? There's man's world and God's world. This makes it more difficult, but not impossible to understand the meaning. The problem arises when people attempt to match the ingredients in their stew to those in the biblical writer's stew without knowing which cookbook was used, right? Was it man's cookbook or God's cookbook, right? We do not have to know the answers to all of the questions. No, we don't. But knowing at least some of them helps us to understand what the writer wanted to convey. And that's very important. You have to know what the writer wanted to convey. Some people have a hard time connecting the Bible's culture to their own. Yes. And if they can't, it's going to make it harder for them to proceed or continue, progress in their Christianity, in their faith. However, the stories within the Bible go deeper than just the superficial, excuse me, cultural variances. So superficial means like kind of just on the surface, right? People use that word a lot, like, do you guys have a deep relationship? And the person might answer you, no, it's kind of superficial. We just date and enjoy each other's company, but we don't have any plans for the future, you know. And then superficial cultural variances. So this means that there might be some cultural variances or differences, but there might be just on the small side. They're not that deep. Biblical narratives display or show the root culture of humanity. Root, right? So it's like the Chinese have a saying, if you want to understand the blossoming of a flower, you must understand the root. So things can be superficial between people, but the biblical narratives go all the way back to the root culture of humanity, and that means all the races, the way we think and act as humans versus, well, I'm Mexican and you're Italian, so we're different. No. When you go back to the root as humans, then we're the same, regardless of culture. Therefore, the Bible is relatable to all cultures because every culture has a human component, right? Unless you're talking to a pack of Chihuahuas, then that's different. They don't have a human component. They are Chihuahua, right? Which is okay because I was raised by wild Chihuahuas. So it's all right. I understand them. People are not that different from each other. Nope. Since the Bible is a cross-cultural book and can speak to anyone, again, just like our class, cross-cultural, there will always be some point of common contact. In other words, The stew of the Bible will relate to our stew in some meaningful way. So just look at it like this. I mean, I don't know, pick some really cultural different people, right? Let's say Japanese are really different than Mexicans, right? In their culture, how they look at the world and how they do things. But they are both human. So they will both cry when they are sad, smile when they are happy, and dance when they feel joy. So that's the human connection. That's where the Bible's relating to everyone. Genre plays a large stew in the meaning. Excuse me. Man, I need some soju. When message and message styles are matched between producers and receivers. So genre is a certain theme, right? If you might have different themes. The intended meaning is more likely to be formed by the audience. In other words, so this is not to confuse you, if the person trying to communicate can use a genre or style, theme, that the receptor can understand, then there is a better chance the communication will be understood. For instance, if I referred to a science fiction movie, my point would be lost if you had never seen the movie or did not like the genre or the science fiction style. However, if you were a science fiction fan, then my point would connect with you in a meaningful and memorable way. Okay? I'll give you a little personal antidote on my side. Okay? Ever since I started watching Korean movies many years ago, I guess when I started teaching in K-Town, right? So many years ago, I started watching Korean movies like Shiri and Nabi and what was the other? Was a movie with John Dong-gun, and he was trying to stop people putting bombs in the metro station in Seoul. You know, oh, Tube, yeah, Tube. Then Typhoon. So through the years, I've watched many Korean movies, and I noticed something. I didn't see any science fiction movies. Police movies, Chosun Dynasty movies, dramas. I forget the name of this movie, but it was a strange, like a vampire kind of guy, but I don't know for Sadong. It was very strange. But I didn't see any science fiction movies. And I asked some of my students, Korean students, hey, science fiction is big with American people. What's going on here? And they said, Korean people are not worried like Americans of aliens coming to the world and taking over the world, like Independence Day, things like that, right? So that might not be a good way to try to connect with a Korean person. You might have to use a different genre, and that's just the way different cultures can be. So if I continue here, it says by the same token or the same way, because token can mean like a bus token, but we use it metaphorically for saying the same way. If someone loves to read poetry, a good way to get a message across to them might be to put it in a poetic form. So that genre is better. Now that's a genre where most American men are not into poetry. So if you try to approach them with some deeply felt, feelings-filled poetry passage, it might be lost on them. They might say, huh? What are you talking about? What, love is like the ocean? It flows, and I don't understand. I can't swim. I don't understand what that means. So it might be lost in that sense. Okay. So we'll give another example. If a person likes reading books about history, communicating through the historical genre would help to connect with them, right? The person is good with history. You might, like if it's American history, use examples of Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. If it's Chinese history, you might use Confucius, right? Lao Tzu for philosophy. Mao Zedong as a real person. Korea, King Sejong, you know, things like that. Not Andre Kim, okay? Continuing, surely everyone can find some genre in the Bible that appeals to him, as there are poetry, songs, action, adventure, narrative, history, and letters, among others. Right? So look at that. You might say, the Bible as a whole, I don't know. Just pick a slice, as they say, from the Bible and use that. So if you have a liking or a strong background, or you think the person you want to communicate with, the receptor, because you would be the communicator at that point, likes poetry, or they like songs, right? So like you can tell somebody, if it's through music, American person, you might say, I never meant you any sorrow. I only wanted to see you bathe in the purple rain. So it must be a Prince fan. Right? So there you go. So we're here. The different genres take into account people's various communication styles and learning methods, allowing God to reach everyone with the truth. So it's everyone from every different background and culture. Okay. Our stew of meaning includes another set of ingredients, our predisposition. Does anybody know what that means, predisposition? Okay. Predisposition means kind of what our personal feelings are about things already, right? You can't really change those. They're difficult to change, right? When I've been in Japan, I've seen Japanese people wait in really long lines and be very patient. So maybe they are predisposed, right? As an adjective, they're predisposed to having patience and not minding waiting in a long line. But you put Americans in a long gas line or a long food line, and they start getting angry and yelling and making a lot of noise. So maybe American people are not predisposed to having patience. Right? Individuals have predispositions to listen to particular messages and reject others. So they'll get into this now. Based on their anticipation of satisfaction from particular messages, individuals self-select what they will, okay? And this what they will brings us to the bottom of page 39. Okay, so that means you know it's question time. Let me go back to the new share. Back to the whiteboard. Get the pencil. Okay. All right, so we've just finished 39. I'm off into question 6. Okay, this is an easy and crisp one. Biblical narratives display what? So I use the word display so to make it easier for you to actually find the answer. I could have changed the something else, but you'll be able to locate it easier, okay? Let me stretch this. All right. So it looks like I'm being kind here on 39. I'm only going to give you 2 questions. Wow, I'm too kind. What can I say? Okay, let me make sure I get this correctly. This is question 7. What allows God to reach with truth? So repeating, what allows God to reach everyone with truth, right? Their truth. Okay, so let me stretch this and then can I do it? Can I do it? Oh, good man. So let me give you a few to write those down, okay? My notations. Okay, you doing okay there? Just give you a few more. Because I know Muntaran and maybe Sadem. Simon's back in the picture. You girls are working really fast, so that's good. Or maybe Caroline. I have to give her credit too. Okay, let me go for that eraser. 6, biblical narratives display what? Again, I don't want to hear funny guys saying, they display rainbow colors. No, they are not Skittles. 7, what allows God to reach everyone with truth? Please don't use money in this context. Okay? We're talking about cross-cultural communication, the Christian thing. Okay, that's done. Go back up here to the new share, back to the material. Okay. So when we got down here, based on their anticipation of satisfaction from particular messages, individuals self-select what they will. Okay, so that's the end of 39, which means we got to roll over to 40. Okay, and pay attention to, we are at the top of 40. Okay. So what it's saying is we kind of choose, due to our predispositions, what we will listen to. We hear what we want to hear. Somebody wants to listen to classical music. Another person wants to listen to rap and hip hop. Right? We are predisposed, I guess. People who see this phenomenon in their spouses or husbands or wives call it selective hearing. We tend to listen more attentively if the topic is something we like or if it will benefit us. Okay, so what this is saying is that you have a married couple, they've been married for a while, and let's say the wife starts talking to the husband who's, I don't know, reading the newspaper, watching the television. If she says something about her friends that's not really directed to him, he might not really listen. But if she starts talking about something that will benefit him or is about him, he will selectively then turn the ears on to start listening. Continuing, we will listen to someone who tells us how great we are, but tune out the boss who constantly berates us or complains at us for no reason. So we want to hear good things. So people who say good things, we listen to them all the time. People who say bad things, we kind of like, sure, tell me what you want to say. I'm watching the Lakers right now. It's okay. We have a predisposition to dislike listening to rules. That's true. How many times have they told you guys, turn off the cell phones? And the Candy Crush and Facebook continues. Right? Even if they are for our benefit, yes, so that you could possibly get an A on the test. If you doubt this, ask some airline attendants how many people pay attention to their pre-flight talk about security exits and flotations advice. That's right, I just thought about that. And I am also guilty. They'll stand up there and say, and if you have to exit, there's one on my right, one on my left. The cabin doors are back here. Flotation devices are up there. Do this, yada, yada. And I kind of like one eye look at them, the other eye look out the window, waiting for the plane to start because it's late, and think, well, what's the percentage we're going to get into a crash? So whatever, and the oxygen mechanism will drop down in front of you, pull the string, open the tap, so I think I can remember it, but watching it's a whole other thing. We kind of like turn it off. In some way, people pay attention to the parts of the Bible they like or that benefit them. They can read about God's love all day long, but can't sit still for a minute when the 10 Commandments are presented, which tells you, you shall not steal, you shall not covet another person's wife, you shall not lust, you shall not. They don't want to hear that because then they got to do something. But if they read the part of the Bible that says God is a loving God, God will always love you and support you. Keep on talking to me, baby. I want to hear some more. This idea of predispositions can be seen in 2 Samuel 11 through 12, which relates the story of David and Bathsheba, the adultery and killing of the latter's husband Uriah, and the subsequent or following condemnation of David by the prophet Nathan. The interpretation of Nathan's story that I'd always heard from the pulpit or where the pastor speaks focused on the adultery, and that means when somebody's married and they have sex with another person outside the marriage. And then the following murder. No mention was made of the abuse of power. Those who are in positions of power, whether they are leaders, rich, or the majority population, have a predisposition to interpret this story a certain way. Okay, that's what the author feels. In my classes, I conduct an experiment. Okay, let's proceed. That begins with a reading of Nathan's story, 2 Samuel 12, 1 through 6. Then the students report on what they believe the story means. Without fail, these people determine that the story is about the abuse of power rather than they don't concentrate on the adultery or the murder. Very interesting. Prior knowledge is also an ingredient in our stew. Okay. At times, we develop blind spots because of something we learned previously. And if you know how to drive, then you know what a blind spot is. That's the part where you drive and there's a person right behind you on your, well, not right behind you, but behind you on the other lane, and you cannot see them, but you can hear the vehicle. It's a blind spot. Here we're talking about once you learn something, you don't want to listen to anything about it anymore because, well, I learned that, and you create your own blind spot. We then interpret any further information based on prior knowledge, even if it was wrong. Very interesting. For instance, I was writing this book. I gave some people rough drafts of certain chapters and asked them for feedback. Brother Bernard, a national pastor in the Democratic Republic of Congo, pointed out that I'd mentioned the angel of death when I described the Passover story. He gently said that his Bible did not contain those words, and that it appeared that God was the one who passed over, not an angel. Somewhere along the way, I had been taught that an angel of God passed over Egypt, much like the story in 2 Chronicles in which David saw an angel wiping out Israel. Every time I read Exodus 12, I unconsciously placed an angel into the story. When I reread the passage carefully, I discovered that Brother Bernard was right. God, not an angel, passed over Egypt, which makes the story entirely different and stronger. So he had a blind spot there from prior learning. We must always keep in mind that and that brings us to the bottom of 40. Back to the whiteboard, okay? Gotta get to those questions. That's all. So 40 brings us to question 8. Let me make sure I write this correctly. Oops. Oh. Put these together correctly. Okay, we have a predisposition to what? It's mentioned here in the reading. We as humans, something we don't like, right? That's my hint to you. So let me stretch this. Okay. And then 9. I'm only going to ask you 2 on this page. So we have a predisposition. There's something we don't like. We're predisposed not to like it. I wrote this so small. Okay. What is also an ingredient to our stew? So this is something they just mentioned on this page, an extra ingredient. So please say what it is. Stretch time. Okay. And, let me give you a few there. Bring me up to pace here. Okay, 40, it's finished. Questions for 40, it's finished. Okay, so finish those up. And possibly the next page is the last page. Yay! At least I think so. Right? Okay, you almost got those wrapped up, those two. Answers are not long, so I guess I'll go for the eraser. Okay, so 8, we have a predisposition to what? Again, my hint is there's something we don't like. 9, what is also an ingredient to our stew? So they just added a new ingredient. Okay, so back to the new share. Back to the reading material. Now, we must always keep in mind that our brings us to the bottom of 40. And that means we have to move to 41. Okay. And as you can see, this is the end. Half a page. Yay. Okay. So let's go. Predispositions and earlier experience and learning can hinder or slow down our ability to understand and communicate with others. Here is one example that focuses on 3 parables. The lost sheep, Luke 15, 3 through 7. The lost coin, Luke 15, 8 through 10. And the lost son, Luke 15, 11 through 32. We get a variety of interpretations from well-respected scholars. Justo Gonzalez, who was born in Cuba and emigrated to the United States, says, the 3 parables are not originally addressed to the lost, but to those who feel left out because Jesus is eating with the lost, to those who have never been lost. He sees Jesus speaking to the 99 sheep instead of to the one. The sheep are to reach out to the margins of society or the edges of society. According to Stephanie Buckhannon Crowder, the parables reflect God reaching out and finding those who are lost or in a spiritual wilderness. Because many people in his culture are walkers. Paul John Isaac sees the parables as an analogy to our walking with Jesus as he searches for the lost. None of these interpretations is wrong, but they do show how our experiences can influence our interpretations of the scriptures. Yay! That brings us to the bottom and end of 41. That is our last page for today. But you know, I gotta have a question. So let's go to that whiteboard. Get that pencil. So let me ask you guys. You want me to ask you 10 questions? It's the last page, right? 10 questions? Or I'll give you a choice. 10 questions or 1. What did I hear? Temujin said 10. Sorry, Temu. The ladies want 1. Okay? They have a stronger vote. So let me get that pencil. Last question for today. 10. Easy one, straightforward, just like we started. Okay. Our experiences can influence what? Okay, again, this is on a personal level. Stretch this. So I'm not talking about, oh, can our experience influence Donald Trump? Can they influence Joe Biden? That's not what I'm talking about here. Again, the cross-cultural communication. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. So let me give you a couple to answer that. Make my markings. We finished with the 41. Finished with my question for 41. Alrighty. So I guess that wraps it up for us today. So get the eraser. Where is that eraser? Again, 10. Our experience can influence what? You know what I'm talking about here. So no funny stuff. Okay, that's it for that. Let me go there. Actually, let me stop share. Hey, there I am. Okay, so that's it for this week. Take care. Have a happy Halloween. And I'll talk to you next week. Okay? Bye-bye.